A lease is an agreement between someone who owns something and someone who wants to use it for a period of time. When you sign a lease for a property, you're agreeing to make payments to your landlord for a time, and your landlord is agreeing to let you live in that place for a time. But we're human and we can't control whether we get sick and need to move into a care facility during that year, or whether we lose a job, or what unexpected circumstances we'll run into. Whether you're a tenant or a landlord, breaking a lease can expose you to some financial and legal risks. But it's possible, and there are ways to minimize your risk. Here are some things to think about if you're considering breaking your lease so you can avoid being taken to court. First, if you're a tenant, the first thing to do to make sure you're prepared is to read through your lease. In some situations, you're legally allowed to break your lease. Say your property is unsafe and you've complained to your landlord and the health department, and your landlord still hasn't resolved the issue. If you've done all of your complaining in writing, you're allowed to break your lease. You're also allowed to break your lease if you're on active duty and the military reassigns you to a new city or state. If you get sick and have to move into a care facility, if you're a victim of domestic violence, or if your landlord harasses you or enters your home without notice or cause. But if you're not legally allowed to break your lease, talk to your landlord. Some will be understanding, especially if you offer to take care of finding a new tenant to replace you. Your landlord's primary concern when you decide to break your lease is losing months of rent in the process of looking for a new tenant. If you offer to help, your landlord is likely to be more open to negotiating with you. It's also wise to seek professional advice. Tenants unions can educate you about the laws and your rights in your city and state and walk you through the process of breaking a lease. If you've done all of this and remain unable to come to any agreement with your landlord and fear being on the hook for additional rent, you may want to consult with a tenant's rights attorney. If you're a landlord and considering breaking a lease, you also have options. Maybe your tenant is violating the terms of his or her lease agreement by not paying rent or hiding an unauthorized pet or roommate. In this case, you'd send your tenant a letter asking for the issue to be resolved. If your concerns go unaddressed, you can break the lease. But if you don't have just cause, it can be tough to terminate a lease agreement. You could also pay your tenant to move out, but if your tenant isn't open to this option, your only option may be to wait the lease out. If this makes you uncomfortable, it's best to rent your property month to month or without a long-term lease. Another option is to build an early termination clause into your lease agreement in the first place. We're eForms, the largest online database of legal forms, and we have just about every document that you can imagine for leases, evictions, and more. Click the link to access more templates that can guide you through the process.